All right, just pause for a moment once again. Reach up, touch your heart.
Feel the reverberations of having just shared, connected with each other.
Rest in this quality of clear presence, embracing the flowing, changing, cascading stream of your experience with great compassion. Let the flow of the breath, the hand touching the heart, and a gentle smile be anchors for all three of these qualities. Clear presence, flow, great compassion. And may these carry you through the day. Let's just do one last piece just to really honor the gifts and the preciousness of the time and the energy and the learnings and the love we've shared. I just invite you, just sense that the room is just full of, if you had the eyes to see, like the kahu who opened up today, who maybe has a little bit more perceptual bandwidth than some of the rest of us that just intuit it. Just sense the gifts and the blessings that are present here in this room from us having come together in this way. And just imagine that you could reach out with your arms and just gather all the goodness that's been generated through your deep listening and your clear presence and compassion during this last hour together. And just gather all the blessings from this session into your heart. Hold them with gratitude and then just radiate a big wave of mahalo and blessings, that those energies will continue to flow and nurture and support you as your stream continues on. And from your heart, let this goodness and this light flow out as a wave of blessings and thanks to all the people at your table and to the tables around you. And sense and imagine that all this great goodness that you hold in your heart can flow from your heart into the hearts of all of your loved ones, all of your friends, all of your patients, all of your colleagues. That your heart just becomes a portal to just presence the gifts that are present within you. To offer those that they may be received however each of these beings most needs to receive at this time. Let's do the metta one more time. And then let's close by bringing our voices together again and just echoing the radiance of this with these words.
And in a spirit of dedicating the rest of this day and the rest of our lives to really living fully and sharing these gifts and these dedications that we hold together with the words of the loving kindness meditation.
May I, we, and all beings be happy and peaceful.
May I, we, and all beings be happy and peaceful. May I, we, and all beings be free from suffering and fear. May I, we, and all beings be free from suffering and fear.
May I, we, and all beings live with love and compassion.
May I, we, and all beings live with love and compassion. And may I, we, and all beings fully awaken to the gifts, to the preciousness of our lives, of our love, and even of our grief. Awaken and be free. May I, we, and all beings fully awaken and be free.
Mahalo nui loa.
Hello.
It's really a blessing to be here with you all.
And any time throughout the day, just remember, just come back to your heart and reboot your clear presence and great compassion.
As I mentioned this morning, I've been doing hospice for 10 years. And in my hospice work, I have had the privilege of being with many families and patients and walking them through the process until their loved one dies. For the most part, my experience with hospice is that people have time to take care of unfinished business, to make final arrangements, to make their wishes known. They have time to say goodbye, to say, I love you one more time. Deaths that occur on hospice are often referred to as peaceful, sometimes even beautiful. But this is not the case with the situations that our panel members walk into. They deal with sudden, unexpected, often violent deaths. They deal with murder, suicide, violent accidents, casualties of war, extreme situations. When they work with people, emotions are extremely high, very intense. The families that they're working with, did not have time to say goodbye, did not have time to prepare. They're often at a loss with what to do. These incredible ladies step into that intensity as a calming force, holding families and gently guiding them through, as they try to make sense of what happened and what needs to happen next. I've had the privilege over the last few months of getting to know these incredible ladies. And our first panel member is Jessica Lonnie Rich. Jessica is the president and executive director of the Visitor Aloha Society of Hawaii. She's also the CEO of Travelers Aid of Honolulu. She received a bachelor's degree in communication from San Francisco State University and completed graduate studies in communication as a master's candidate at the University of Hawaii. Jessica is a critical incident specialist. She's received her formal training in bereavement at the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation in Baltimore, Maryland. Jessica was recently elected to the National Board of Directors for Travelers Aid International. Because of the excellent program that Hawaii has to support travelers in crisis, Travelers Aid of Honolulu is often used as a model for other cities. Jessica personally supervised hundreds of cases involving visitors in crisis and is a first responder to assist families of visitors who die while on vacation. They come to Hawaii with anticipation of the fun they're going to have, often unprepared for any type of crisis. Jessica is the calm, loving presence that shows up when their dream vacation becomes a nightmare. Jessica Lonnie Rich, I'm just going to share a little bit more.
Thank you, Cheryl, and good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to see everyone here. Cheryl's correct. I'm involved with the Visitor Aloha Society of Hawaii, also known as VASH, which is what most people call us by. We are a nonprofit agency. We were started by the Rotary Club in Honolulu because tourism, with our #1 industry, and I don't know how many of you saw the news yesterday, but tourism is on the increase here in Hawaii. And as more visitors come to Hawaii with their dream vacation, with that dream vacation also comes a number of tragedies. As Cheryl mentioned, I am a first responder, and the majority, even though I have about close to 100 volunteers involved with our agency, the majority of them, the purpose of VASH is to assist visitors who have an unfortunate incident while they're here in the islands. And that unfortunate incident might involve a lost wallet or theft on the beach, which the majority of my volunteers handle. But when it comes to tragic incidents, and I have seen just about everything imaginable that you can think of that could happen on vacation or you don't want to think of, whether it be from incidents that happen on a cruise ship. We work with the majority of cruise ships that come to Hawaii. There were times when we literally had 3 people who passed away on board of a cruise ship, and the cruise director would call our office and we would be there. Our office works very closely with the medical examiner's office, the police, the firefighters, the hotels, the ocean safety, because we do also see usually the deaths, the tragic incidents that happen under the age of 30 normally involve what we call daredevil deaths. These are the visitors who come here and, you know, when the surf is high, it's like, don't go into the water. And many of our visitors think that that sign, don't go into the water, means it's for everyone else but for them. And they will go into the water, and as a result, that one poor decision affects the lives of so many people. Because not only do we assist the family member here, but I also work very closely with the family members back home. And can you imagine how you would feel? And I know how I would feel because my father was a visitor. He had gotten, not here to Hawaii, but he had met someone and she wanted him to meet her family in San Salvador. And he flew there on vacation. And I got a call from the family, Jessica, I'm very sorry to tell you, but your father, who went out on a swim, died suddenly as a heart attack. And you feel so helpless. I know what that feels like, and because of that sensitivity, I feel that I'm able to not only assist the families here, but also to open my hearts to the families back home. Mari, in her film earlier, which you saw when the conference opened, spoke about the beauty of paradise. Many of the visitors that I deal with, they will save literally a year, 2 years, 3 years just to come to Hawaii. You know, Hawaii 5.0, because it's renewed now, it's also re-sparked a lot of interest in Hawaii. So they'll come here, and sudden death or tragic accidents can happen anytime, any place, anywhere. For example, about 2 years ago, I got a phone call on a Friday night from the Honolulu Police Department, who I work very closely with. I'm also involved with their training. I train many of the police officers about the very special needs of visitors. Because as Cheryl said, visitors are thousands of miles away from home. Many of our residents have their family and friends here, but our visitors have no one. And the call that I got was that a 14-year-old boy, it was a beautiful, beautiful day on Waikiki Beach, and his mom and dad were here with AAA. AAA gave them their dream vacation to Hawaii because the mom was a top producer for AAA sales. And Jordan Lozier, his name was in the news, so this is not confidential. It was on all the news stations. He had gone on a catamaran cruise, and within 1 minute, the catamaran had an accident. It broke, and it broke his neck, and he died. 14-year-old Jordan Lozier died instantly on the catamaran. Not only did this affect the mom and dad who were on the catamaran, but it also affected the 22 other people who were here with AAA. I got called to the Queens Medical Center by the doctors and also by the police and the medical examiner to go to Queens and to deal with the grieving parents of Jordan Lozier. who, as you can imagine, were in shock. This was their dream vacation. And the dad kept saying over and over again, Jordan didn't want to go on the catamaran. He said, Dad, I want to play video games, and I forced him to go on the catamaran. And the dad was in the ER room. So we spent hours not only helping the family, getting them back. We basically, because many of the visitors are in shock when tragedy happens, we basically show up. I meet people during their darkest hours. When you're on vacation, you're supposed to be having the best time of your life. And we show up there and we basically help them through the whole process, right back to scheduling their air flight back home. And we also deal with the secondary trauma victims, which in this case were all the AAA members. But we also show love. And we also send them back with Aloha. In the Jordan Lozier case, I invited all of the AAA members who came here, including the family members, to come to a beachside memorial for Jordan Lozier. And I had the memorial service, hosted it in Waikiki. Do many of you know where Kapahulu is, where the Kapahulu walkway is? And right at the end of it, there's a beautiful gazebo there. The mother came in a wheelchair. She was so grief-stricken she couldn't even walk. I had my musician play Over the Rainbow, and we had the memorial service for Jordan Lozier. And many of Jordan's friends talked about how he loved Hawaii. And just as the memorial service was over, this beautiful rainbow appeared over Waikiki Beach. And it was as if Hawaii and this hidden power that we're talking about was saying to the family and many of the members of AAA, Jordan's going to be okay. And I wanted to send them home, not with the memory of the tragedy of Jordan Lozier, but of the memory of the beauty of Hawaii, the love and the aloha. And that's what they remembered. Yeah, there was a tragedy that occurred, but my job is to turn that tragedy into a feeling of inspiration, to send the family members home with love, with peace, and aloha. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Jessica. Amazing. Our second panel member is Elizabeth Olsen, or Liz, as she prefers to be called. Liz currently works as the Outreach Director for Army Community Services. She is also Program Manager for Survivor Outreach Services. She began her career with a degree in education and taught elementary school for 3 years. But in 1976, while traveling in Germany, she met a young soldier who later became her husband, and the direction of her life was forever changed. She's worked with the Military Family Program for 20 years. In January 2007, Liz experienced a great tragedy that changed her life. Since then, she has worked with the Army Wounded Program in Europe until she returned to Hawaii in 2008. And she now works with families of the fallen. She works closely with military chaplains and behavioral health programs, connecting families with resources and providing support. In the midst of her own tragedy, Liz used what she has learned to reach out to others with compassion, love, and understanding. After spending time with Liz these last few months, I have no doubt that she is very skilled in working with military families, ensuring that they know that the Army cares. Liz Olsen.
Thank you. Aloha. My elementary teaching was in Australian, so that's why my accent is a little different than yours. I've been an Army spouse, a military spouse, for over 30 years, and as Cheryl said, have worked Army programs for 20 years. Have worked my husband was stationed in Germany, 2001 through 2008, and in Germany I worked with mobilization and deployment, worked with soldiers deploying, worked with families preparing for deployment, taught classes such as the preparation for the separation that families feel, and did a lot of things that you would think would have given me strength if anything had ever happened within my family. But on the 20th of, on the 20th of January 2007, 2 Class A uniforms knocked at our door in Heidelberg, Germany, to tell us that my oldest son, Toby, had been killed in Iraq by an IED along with 3 buddies. That moment that, you know, I had prepared for in a way by teaching classes and instructing and educating families how to deal with separations and worst case scenarios, although in that time, you know, talking about casualties was an absolute no-no. My life, our lives changed forever. My husband's still in the Army, and I had an option to change my job, to go under the blanket and cry my life away, or I could do something that was in my personality, and that's to have a positive attitude and to use the skills that I'd learned over the 20 years by providing support to others. And initially I worked with the Wounded Warrior program in Europe. And then when we came to Hawaii, a new program was developed, Survivor Outreach Services. And we have, as you know, over 5,000 soldiers and Marines and Air Force and sailors have lost their lives, and civilians have lost their lives in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And those numbers, for every one of those soldiers, there are families, large families, and there are battle buddies, and it's just enormous, the number of folks that are impacted by the death of a soldier or a military person. And so the Army developed this program to make sure that those families were cared for in the places where they live throughout the nation. As you're well aware, Hawaii is made up of every branch of service, and I'm not sure what the statistics are or the percentage is, but we have, military is very much a part of Hawaii. And we have our Casualty Assistance Center for the Army, and I speak Army, although we welcome any branch of service, is the Casualty Assistance Office is at Schofield, and it's responsible for the Pacific, meaning Guam, Northern Marianas Islands, American Samoa. And since 2001, we have 248 casualties that have Hawaii ties. Those deaths may or may not be by a combat-related death. Those deaths could be an accident during training. Those deaths could be on one of our roads. Those deaths could come from illness. As long as a soldier, Army National Guard or Reserve soldier, was wearing a uniform at the time of his or her death, they are cared for, their families are cared for by the United States Army. And the Survivor Outreach Program cares for all of those survivors, those immediate next of kin, those aunties, those uncles, the grandparents, and also the battle buddies. So this program is new and is located in the Army at Fort Shafter. The other place of support for survivors is, all survivors, is through, is through an organization called TAPS, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. And each year they have a regional conference here, and they reach out and touch families of surviving families across the world. And they provide peer mentors. They provide lots and lots of support through financial support and counseling support. and it's one of those organizations that personally my husband and I could not have done without, and we would not be where we are today without their support. And then the Army family support, because the Army is a family and we're a long way from home, except my husband's a local boy. So most families don't have that close-knit family. When a tragedy occurs, they have to rely on their Army family, and the Army is good about providing that support. Thanks very much, Cheryl.
Thank you. Our third panel member, Connie Moreau. The work that she does is really important to me personally. Mari has worked for the past 3 years for Legacy of Life Hawaii, which is previously known as the Organ Donor Center. She's their family services coordinator. I've been personally touched by organ donation. My sister has received 2 kidney transplants, one from someone who signed their donor card. So the work that she does has affected me very personally. Mari has a bachelor's degree in communication from Lewis and Clark College of Portland, Oregon. She has a master's degree in social work from Hawaii Pacific University, which she received August 2007. Prior to working at Legacy of Life Hawaii, Mari interned at the Waikiki Health Center, and she was also an intern for St. Francis Hospice in our bereavement department. And that's where she created the film that you all saw this morning, called Grieving Hearts from Hawaii. We also use that film to train our volunteers. Mari has really difficult conversations with families at a very sensitive time about how their loved one can live on through the gift of life. I believe that her gentle presence makes these conversations easier and opens people to the possibility of organ donation. Thank you for what you do, Mari.
Hello. Okay. I wanted to comment on the Grieving Hearts from Hawaii. JP is a chaplain at Kaiser. Also told me today it's another name for that title could be Healing Hearts, because those stories is about how each person heals after their loss and continues to find and redefine life for themselves. So thanks, JP. I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to join the Legacy of Life Hawaii Ohana in the Family Services program following my internship with St. Francis Hospice. And I guess my role is to go into the hospital and support a family who has just experienced a sudden loss of their loved one through a tragedy, traumatic death. So it could be a stroke, it could be any kind of head injury, suicide, and a lot of motor vehicle accidents. And this is, again, very unexpected and very sudden within a day or two when someone comes into the hospital and is pronounced brain dead. We will get our organization will get a referral, and we are the only organization in the state of Hawaii that's authorized to recover organs and tissue for transplant. So I'm there with the family as well as the doctor and the other social workers in the hospital and chaplains, and offering support to the family and helping them go through, just get by minute to minute, helping them ask questions that maybe they should be asking, or re-explaining things. As you know, when you're going through grief, your level of function is at a 5th grade level, and oftentimes you'll hear things or it'll go out, you'll hear it and it'll go right out the other ear. So repeating things is very important, and at the right appropriate timing, very sensitively, I'll also present and share information to the family about an opportunity to help others through donating organs and tissues to save someone's life who's on the waiting list. Even here in Hawaii, there's over 400 people that are in need of a liver or kidney, and on the, of course, nationwide as well. And it could be a child, it could be a teenager, an adult. You just never know, any ethnicity as well, who you can help. So interestingly, I guess I did want to note that I think it was a week, or maybe it was 2 weeks, I think it was a week before my interview with Legacy of Life Hawaii, my dad's younger brother, my uncle, had a stroke, and he was in Kona. They air ambulanced him to Maui. Within a week, he had the bleed, the hemorrhagic stroke was so severe that he was pronounced brain dead. My auntie and my dad was there, and they were approached by one of the representatives, that she's not here, or one of my former coworkers, about organ donation, and my auntie and my dad consented, and they donated. So there's 3 people alive today because of my uncle.
Thank you for sharing that. Now I would like to turn the podium over to Michelle and Joel Levey, Dr. Levey, and they are going to moderate the panel discussion. There's going to be an exercise that they'll help you go through. Thank you.
I'm going to read you a scenario of a sample of an incident of extreme grief that we've just been hearing about. And I'd like you to listen to it, because in a little while after I read this scenario, we're going to ask you at your tables to talk about how you would deal with this kind of a situation. So if you would listen to it with that kind of a quality of listening. And afterwards we'll hear also from how the panel would each respond. So here it is. Mike, a 36-year-old Army man from Detroit, Michigan, came to Hawaii on vacation. Having just returned from a tour in Iraq and wanting to spend some quality time with his 2 sons, ages 10 and 12, he brought them along. Mike is divorced. His wife lives in San Diego, California. Aaron, a 25-year-old tourist from Sydney, Australia, was also visiting Hawaii with his girlfriend. He was legally separated from his wife, who also lives in Sydney. Aaron was a skilled surfer and enjoyed taking chances. He had heard about the big waves on the North Shore and was excited to be able to surf them. Mike also decided to surf on the North Shore that day. The waves were too big for his sons to surf, so they stayed on the beach and watched. Although he was a good surfer, Mike was not used to the huge waves on the North Shore. He ended up losing control while surfing and collided with Aaron. Both were unconscious when lifeguards pulled them out of the water. After being transported to the hospital, Mike was pronounced brain dead, and he died later that afternoon. The police transported Mike's sons to the hospital. While talking to the boys on the way to the hospital, they were able to determine that Mike was in the military. The boys were frantic, unable to remember which hotel they had been staying in.
In this particular situation, the Visitor Aloha Society would probably have gotten a phone call from the medical examiner's office and also from the police department letting us know that Mike, this 37-year-old Army man from Detroit, had passed away. In which case, we can do one of two things. Now, because he has two sons, and we've dealt with a number of cases where children are involved, and what normally happens is Hawaii does have a law that if there is an unattended child, that you're supposed to call CPS. However, and this is the however is an interesting point, we because he is in the military, we would call SOS. Survivor Outreach Services, and call upon Liz, because if they step in before the CPS is called and the parents are notified, then the children, once there is a legal guardian, could have an adult supervision, which has been done many times before. Meanwhile, Aaron, the 25-year-old tourist from Sydney, who is also visiting with his girlfriend, the part about legally separated is very tricky, because the question mark there's a question mark whether his wife has rights or not. And because of that question mark, what we would do is two things. Number one, immediately contact the Australian consulate and let them know about this situation. Secondly, contact the parents, because if they're at a point in their legal separation where they were about to be go in the divorce route, then an attorney would have to take a look at her rights in this particular case. So we would also get the parents involved and the consulate. And because Aaron did have a girlfriend, we also participate in assisting the secondary trauma victim, which would be the girlfriend. And normally we also ask two very practical questions when there's a tragic situation like this. One is, what is your departure date? And because sometimes when people go surfing, but you do believe some of them even go surfing the night that some of them have midnight flights and they go surfing anyway, which means that there are some practical things that need to be done. You have to call the airlines. If they've already checked into a hotel, we would assist with hotel accommodations as well. But in this case, working very closely with the Australian consulate and getting all the information and first doing an assessment as to what is going to be done next, as many of you do in your profession. I work closely with many of the social workers here, and obviously our first step is to do that assessment as well. Liz, so I'm going to kick it over to Liz, and she will be getting the Army man from Detroit.
Okay. As soon as this is obviously, this is not a personal scenario that I'm aware of, so I'm just taking my experience and my thoughts. This soldier has an ID card. That ID card is his access to his records, and everything he is and where he comes from is on that ID card. So I'm assuming that the the Hawaii police would be passing it over to the military police and giving that ID card number or the ID card. We have a Casualty Assistance Center, which would also be contacted because it's a military death. And through that Casualty Assistance Center, the ball would get rolling as far as notifying. Again, because we have the ID card and the access, we would know, they would know who the next of kin is on the mainland, and be sending out the casualty notification officers and the casualty assistance officers to support that family wherever they might be. The children also at their ages, at 10 and 12, would have ID cards, and the military is good in providing some of those resources I told you about. One of the programs that they have is called Care Response Teams, and when there's a death in a unit, in a family, care response teams, 2 or 3 people would be activated and sent to a home to provide short-term care, 24 to 72 hours, to stay in that home with that family member and support the family. And I'm thinking that if the CPS isn't called in, that this is one of the means that we could have, either in bringing the the children into an emergency placement home, a certified home on post, even though the soldier wasn't stationed here, or providing perhaps in a hotel. I'm thinking Halakoa, that's where a soldier on R&R or just coming back would probably be staying, provide those care response teams, generally females with training. They're volunteers, but have been certified as volunteers to care for survivors short term. So that's I believe that would be, and plus survivor outreach services. We could access our military family life consultants. We could access through Tripler all of the services that Tripler has available to provide that short term care.
And Mari, yes, we'd love to hear how you would respond to this situation.
Thank you. Because of the head injury that both of the individuals experienced, and when an injury is so severe, as in the case of Mike's, he was even pronounced brain dead and died later that afternoon. Brain death is a legal death, so again, that's most of our organ donors are brain dead, and the hospital would call us. We would get a referral early on, pretty much as soon as they meet certain triggers. So a colleague, a transplant coordinator, and myself would go to the hospital and determine if this is someone who could be a donor. If they are, then we'll remain there, and I will work with the staff, the social workers, and in this case, Jessica, or one of her volunteers like Bob, we work together and just provide the best support possible to the family. I also am there because I encourage and actually ask the staff and anyone involved to please do not bring up donation. Even though we're here, we want to be as sensitive and respectful as possible to the family. So you just continue as you normally would in supporting and caring for the patient and as well as the family. And when it gets to the point where donation, when I would talk to the family, that they don't have and no one has to worry about that. That's why we're there. That's why we come. So a call. Some people wonder, who calls us, and again, it's the hospital that would call us. If it is someone who could be a donor, like in this case Mike, then we would be there. It's really also, I just note that helpful if you designate your wishes. You can do that on your license, on your state ID. We also just launched a registry, and it's in the back of this brochure in your folder. DonateLifeHawaii.com, and you can register yourself as an organ donor.
I just wanted to also mention, in the case of the Australian visitor tourist who it was also mentioned that he was seriously injured in the fact that he could pass away in this case. Our office also deals with many international visitors, not just visitors from Australia, but many visitors from Japan as well. And using this test case as a scenario when you're dealing with visitors, it's important to just keep in mind and remember that if, no matter what country the visitor is from, if it is a tragic situation, the consulate should be notified immediately. Because there are a lot of international ramifications that are involved when you do have an international visitor, and how we care for that particular international visitor.
Thank you, Jessica. Okay, we'd like to hear from...
Oh, sorry, I want to make one more comment about, I forgot to talk about the legal next of kin again. Yeah. I guess this one is a little complicated because Mike's legal next of kin, well, we have a hierarchy, and first it would be spouse, but being that he's divorced, it would move on to adult children, but the children are minors, so that would move on to the next of kin, which are parents, and we would look into and see if are they around, are they alive, or where are they? Where in the world are they if they are alive, and if they can be located, then everything can be done by phone as far as explaining what happened, and as well as the option of organ and tissue donation, and that can be recorded and shared with them and done by phone. And as a donor, Mike would remain at the hospital wherever he was admitted, and the organs would be recovered, and that could be transplanted anywhere locally in Hawaii, or it could go to the mainland. I do want to share a couple of families that I worked with recently. One was a Filipino family, and he's been here for 2 years working from the Philippines to support his young family back home. He has a wife who's 22, and they have 2 young children. The family that was present at the hospital is the donor's mother, and as well as siblings, adult siblings. So what I had to do at that point was just talk to the family that was there and present, and they were in fact interested and wanted to help others. They felt that, for the given that his injury, and that he was a healthy young man, and there's some meaning that can come out of this for them, that there's lives that he could save. They really wanted that. Again, the legal next of kin is his wife, who's in the Philippines. The time difference and maybe even language barrier is a factor. After several attempts, I was able to get in touch with her, and she spoke a little English, so that was helpful. And I spoke with her, and she was supportive of the family's wishes. She, wanted to agree with her mother-in-law, and it was just beautiful. She was very appreciative that anyone from the hospital would call her and actually share and take the time to keep her updated. There's another family just recently, again, a Micronesian family that I spoke to the donor's wife and mother, and they, at the end of our conversation, actually thanked me. They thanked me for asking this, or giving them this opportunity. They were just so grateful. So I think, for the families that donate, it just has so much meaning, and we really do honor the families and the donors every year. Here at Ko'olau, we have an annual donor recognition Remembrance ceremony. We release butterflies as a symbol of the transforming gift of donation. We have a video slideshow of each picture, and all the families throughout the last 22 years in Hawaii that we've been here are invited every year. I think that's what I want to share. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mahalo, Mari. Mahalo to all three of you on the panel here. We'd like to invite you just a moment, reach up, touch your heart, and feel the fullness of this moment, the deep complexities that are moving here, and to return to that quality of clear presence as you embrace the flow of all the experiences, the feelings, the thoughts, the sensations that are streaming for you in this moment with great compassion. And as we hover here together, we'd like to invite, as you really listen into your heart and the flow of your experience in this moment, are there questions that you'd like to bring forth for the panel? Things that came up at the tables, or just wonderings or themes to load into or offer to our collective wisdom and collective compassion here. There are some mics. Yes. We've got 2 mic runners here. Raise your hand high, or even wave it if you'd like their attention, and they'll bring the mic over for you. Somebody in the back there?
Just one in the back. Right. Back there.
Oh, she's got questions.
25 minutes.
I have a question. Thank you so much for being here. This is very meaningful. I have a question for each of you. What would you say has been one of the hardest cases that you've had to deal with, and how did you come to terms with it?
I'll take that one, because there's one that at first, there's one case that just, when you asked that question, there's one case that just came up immediately. And that was a case 3 years ago that I had. And it's interesting because I've literally supervised hundreds of visitor cases, but I can remember the names and the incidents and the dates of the most tragic one. And one of them, this one was on New Year's Day, about I think 3 or 4 years ago. His name was Sammy Spiegler. He was 3 years old. It was a big football day, and the parents left the lanai door open at one of the major hotels here in Honolulu, and he fell to his death from the 7th floor of this Waikiki hotel. I got a call, and I remember exactly what I was doing at the call, because I couldn't believe that had happened. I've seen so many tragedies that happen to visitors, but a 3-year-old child, this was indeed one of the hardest. So we went to the hotel, and there was hotel management, there was police, there was firefighters, there were EMS. The family was there. And what made this tragedy, this visitor tragedy, very hard was that the mother, we were in a conference room, and the visitor, the mom, Sammy's body was on the conference table. And for about 4 hours, we all stood there while the mom cried and cried and cried and cried. And none of us, we just waited until even Red Cross was there. And when the 4 hours were over, the medical examiner took the body, little Sammy Spiegler, to Borthwick Mortuary. I accompanied, the grandparents were also here. They were here they had saved all this money to come to Hawaii for a family reunion over the holidays. It was going to be their best family holiday ever. And instead, 3-year-old Sammy Spiegler passes away. And I went to Borthwick Mortuary with the father landed up in ER. He tried to commit suicide that night. And I took the grandparents. I sat actually with him, and the ER doctor said to me, we have 2 choices. We're going to either admit him or we can put him into your custody. And the family was actually flying home the next night. And that was a really tough decision to make. And the father begged me to please let them put him in my custody, so to speak, because he wanted to go to the funeral home to see Sammy. And being also an administrator, I was concerned about liability as well. What would happen if he tried to kill himself on my watch? But anyway, we went to the funeral home, Borthwick Mortuary, did a wonderful, caring job, as they do with many of our visitors. And we walked in there and saw Sammy, and the mom just really obviously couldn't believe it. And fortunately, one of my volunteers, a gentleman by the name of Richard Sue, maybe some of you have seen him on the news, a long time ago. He used to be the public information officer for the fire department. He has a lot of experience with first response, and he stood at the head of Sammy and never left Sammy's body. And the next night, we escorted the family to Continental Airlines, where Sammy's body was placed on the airplane with the family, and they went home. Interestingly enough, 3 years later, I still get emails from the grandparents. Mr. and Mrs. Spiegler had another baby, and a baby girl. And they do think, even though this tragedy happened in Hawaii, they also remember the outpouring of this wonderful team in the tourism industry, the hotel, the firefighter, the police, EMS, Borthwick Mortuary, that all just came together, and we just embraced our arms over this family and just showed as much love as we could to them during this very tragic time.
Oh, I have a lot that every single one is a tragedy, and every single one is tough. Two in particular come to mind. One is a family from Guam, National Guard family. The young girl, Quisling was 19 years of age, and she was the supporter of this family from Guam. And they lived here in Honolulu. She was one of 6 children. She was second to the youngest. And the mother, of course, I bond with the mothers, and the language barrier, the having to take the child, her daughter, back to Northern Marianas Islands to bury her in the family plot, with the family being here, was just very, very tough. There were so many components because they lost a daughter, but they also lost the support that the military was giving them on a weekly basis through their daughter. So there were a lot of things that we did with this family. The family has since returned to Guam. The Hawaii, not the military, supported this family and supports all military families who lose a soldier or a military person by the Medal of Honor ceremony, which is, Hawaii is only one of a few states, so being honored, your son, your daughter, your husband being honored by the state is an incredible feeling that as recipients we have, that we are part of that Hawaiian culture, that Hawaiian ohana. And the quilts are made by the Quilt Guild with messages stitched in and made with love and presented, one to each family member. It's another way of reaching out, and that's a quilt that you hold very dear and near to your heart. The second case was a soldier returning from war. He was in the Warrior Transition Battalion, and that's a transition battalion where a soldier is either going to be returned to duty after 6 months to a year, or is going to be medically discharged and support provided after he or she leaves. This soldier had been in the Warrior Transition Battalion for 2 years, which I don't understand, but he was ready to go within weeks of being chaptered out, medically boarded out, and would return to his island of American Samoa. He didn't make it. His inner wounds were too much, and he took his own life. And the tragedy of thinking that this soldier was unable to go home, perhaps where he could have achieved just as much as he had that last year sitting at a Warrior Transition Battalion, getting counselling and getting the things. What he needed was his home, and what he needed was his family. So working with his family, and for those of you who are part of the Samoan culture, and Hawaiian culture, there's this bond that they have, and the most wonderful thing that I was able to participate in as the soldier was farewelled by his buddies from the Warrior Battalion was at the chapel when 30 of them sang prayers in their native tongue. And it was just the most amazing things. The family had traveled to come collect their father and their husband, and but they're all, every case, every death is a tragedy, and we are able to survive that in different ways, and I'm proud to be a part of the military that provides some of that service.
Thank you. I agree with Liz that every family, it's so difficult and challenging, and it took me a little while to think of one, but I can share one, I guess, this year. That's a sad, very sad case, and Mr. Tang is a taxi cab driver, and he suffered head injuries from his passengers. That the story was that they didn't pay for their fare, and so he was found down in a parking lot on the west side somewhere, and very quickly, by the next day, he had been pronounced brain dead. So it became a homicide case. There's police involved, the medical examiner is involved, and it gets very sensitive, and it very, very hard for a family to understand something just so tragic, you know. And they still didn't know who the two passengers were. They fled and they weren't identified. There were witnesses, so they were working on that. But at the time in the hospital, his next of kin, Mr. Tang's next of kin, was his wife, but she spoke little English. Her first language is Mandarin, and fortunately, one of my good friends is a pediatrician, and she speaks fluent Mandarin. So I just called her and said, "Hey, are you available tonight? Need your help?" And she came and stayed the whole night with me, and we helped translate for the doctor, you know, for everything. Donation comes up last. That's the other aspect, is that we you know, are there for the family to help them understand and just get everything answered, even help them with funeral plans and funeral information. And when it came to this opportunity of donation, Mrs. Tang actually said no. She told me no. She was just grieving too. It was just too much, everything. And we respect everyone's wishes. We want it to, their decision to feel what's right for them. I remained with her because I had built a connection with her, and just continued to offer support and help her when the police came, and as well as the medical examiner, because it's just such a long night, you know, and more questions, and I could in fact inform the police or anyone needed about what information I know, so they don't have to put the family through more questions. And as the night went on, I forgot to mention, there are other family members there, Mr. Tang's siblings, that were in favor of wanting him to be a donor. And so as the night went on, I think as Mrs. Tang just saw our support and care, just that you know, that unconditional care, that we're still there. Just because family says no, that doesn't mean we leave. We're there to help these families go through this time of crisis. And later that evening, she had changed her mind, and she had said, you know, his family wants him to be an organ donor, and she was also against any autopsy, but you know, that's not something that we have a choice about, but we do have a choice about what to do if you would like, in the event of an opportunity to share life and give the gift of life to others. And she changed her mind and said, yes, I would, you know, I will support the family, and for her husband to share life and give life to others. And that just shows just the tremendous, again, altruism of donor families and donors. And this actually made history because he became only the second lung donor in our state of Hawaii. We had a lung surgeon fly in. We don't have a lung program in Hawaii, but a lung surgeon flew in from the mainland and recovered the lungs. And very interestingly, again, instead of the surgeon, you know, flying back, catching an ambulance or something to the airport, he caught a cab. So he rode with the lungs, Mr. Tang's lungs, as a cab driver in a cab to the airport, and they were running late. So actually, you know, they needed to take off as soon as possible as a commercial flight, and the airlines were informed, and in fact they made an announcement at the airport, if there's a medical emergency, if the passengers could board as quickly as possible, they'd like to leave as soon as possible. So everyone boarded very smoothly, and they're able to take off 10 minutes earlier, and the pilots tried to get there as quickly as possible, and they had priority landing in the San Francisco airport as soon as they got in the vicinity, and everything was just lined up as timely, as perfectly as possible. And that just, again, it's just amazing. And this family, the Mrs. Tang had actually invited me to speak at his funeral just to share all the many lives that he saved, 4 people that he saved. And so it just shows a transforming gift and how a family can move from such difficulty in time of crisis to a place of seeing hope, seeing even in the midst of their grief and their loss.
How profoundly our lives are interwoven with each other. Are there any other questions in the audience? Raise a hand. It could be for a specific panelist or for all 3. Down here in front.
I wondered if you could share with us any suggestions that you might have about overcoming the challenge of approaching someone who's in a time of tragedy or loss. I think many of us are here professionally, and all of us are here personally, and I think there's a lot of pull in this room to be support to those who are in a time of loss, and anything that you can offer that will help us with that.
We're trying to, I think we all have different answers. For me, dealing with visitors who experience a critical incident or a tragedy, every person has their own way of dealing with grief. As you know, everyone here is an expert in their own field when it comes to grief. But with a visitor, I had one visitor, and her way of handling grief, she was a 12-year-old girl, and she was involved with a glider crash at Mokuleia, and this was 5 years ago. And in that glider crash, the pilot died, and she lived, and her father also lived. And this is a pretty heavy-duty thing for a 12-year-old girl to handle. And the pilot, they were upside down in the glider at Mokuleia for about 4 hours. So she was in the glider plane with the pilot who had passed away all this time. And her way of handling grief, when I showed up, I said to her, Ashley, what can I do to help? And she looked at me and she said, I would really like an Elvis Presley t-shirt. I said, you like Elvis Presley? And she said, oh yeah, if you come to my home, I'm loaded with Elvis Presley stuff. I got on the phone, I called my office, and I said, we need an Elvis Presley t-shirt within the hour. I don't know where to get one, but I know I'm going to get an Elvis Presley t-shirt.
Again, there's the stages, and I think a lot of validating and validation of each person and what they experience in those stages of grief, anger, or denial, or just really validating, letting them know it's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to not cry. It's okay to laugh. It's healing and also I think as time goes by, it does help to heal, but I really feel that you'll never get over a loss or get over it. Like that's a lie. Like you're not supposed to get over a loss. Your loved one is always going to be with you and live on in your heart. So I think as you get to integrate the loss into your life, your life kind of journey takes on a new path. But again, you're always going to carry that with you, and you'll be surprised at certain times, throughout certain times of the year, a song or a smell will just trigger an emotion in you. And I think just to embrace that and to live it and let others know that it's okay, that can be helpful.
Thank you, Mari. Just pause for a moment and look into your heart, your mind, your body, your soul. And just pause for a moment and feel how you're touched by what's been shared here in this panel. The mix of emotions, the moistness of tears, the beating of your heart, the echoes of each person's voice who spoke at your table or here on the panel. Just take them all into your heart for a moment. And as those gifts flow through you, just radiate back a wave of blessings and love and compassion and support for our panel members, for their courage, for their compassion, for their willingness to sit in the fire with people and be incinerated till all that's left is their clear presence and their great compassion, and to share their love. And just let your love reach out to them as a blessing to continue to strengthen them, and through them flow to all whose lives they touch, and through them to all whose lives they touch, and through them to all whose lives